So I gave a big sermon on Rosh Hashanah Day about collective grief and what it looks like to all be circling to the left together, to all be in a place of mourning together. And I gave a rather personal sharing last night about what it means to live in these bodies and to learn how to love that. But for those of you who are regular Shabbat goers, you know that I very rarely speak from a prepared text. I much prefer the role of teacher to sermonizer. And so I thought we'd learn together this morning, rather than one more big, scripted, long. I thought we could actually think together a little bit. I want to start though with a story. This is an oldie but a goodie. I know I've told it in this community probably a few different times. We also read the same Torah last year, so it's okay. Jews can hear the same story more than once. This story begins with a tailor. They all begin with tailors. It's some snowy village in Eastern Europe. They're all in snowy villages in Eastern Europe. And the tailor is named Mendel because they were all, literally all of them, named Mendel. And Mendel the tailor was a dreamer. In particular, Mendel was finding himself having one dream over and over and over again. It was a dream of an unfamiliar city and a distinctive-looking bridge. And in that dream, he could see that underneath that bridge was buried a treasure. He had this dream day after day, week after week, month after month. It was driving him crazy. And eventually he said to himself, I have to know. I have to know if this dream is really pointing me in the direction of something that might change our lives. I have to go. He told his wife, his children, this is mashugana, this is crazy, but I've got to go. And he went out searching for that unfamiliar city and that distinctive-looking bridge. It took him a long, long time. But somehow, after visiting many places and seeing many things, Mendel found his way to a city that matched his nightly dreams, and ultimately to a bridge that looked terribly, terribly familiar. Under the bridge, there's sort of a muddy culvert, and he looks around and sees no one, and scrambles down to the base and starts to dig with his hands. He starts to dig and scrape away dirt and mud, picking up rocks, pushing them aside, looking for something he didn't know what, looking for anything that might be the answer to his nightly dreams. And as he's down there in the mud, across the bridge above him walks a police officer. And the officer looks down at that Jew still on his hands and knees, digging away, and says, You down there, what in the world do you think you're doing? And Mendel freezes because he realizes, how is he possibly going to answer this question in a way that's not going to make him seem completely crazy? I'm here because I dreamt of this bridge? What could he possibly? But he froze. He couldn't think of another answer, and so he told the truth. He said, Officer, I'm down here because I've been dreaming. I've been dreaming of a treasure buried in this place, and I had to come and look for it. And he pauses, and he waits. He waits to be dragged away. He waits for something worse. And instead, what happens? The police officer starts to laugh. He laughs and laughs until his face turns purple. And he looks down and says, You silly dreamer. Why, I dream every single night for years now of a treasure buried in the vegetable patch of some Jewish country tailor named Mendel. And you don't see me going knocking on doors, shtetl to shtetl, asking if I can dig up other people's potatoes. He walks away, holding his sides, laughing his head off. Now, of course, Mendel returns home, walks in through his door after months away. His family says, "Where were you? Did you find it?" He answers nothing. He walks like a man in a dream. He walks to get his shovel, walks out his door and to his vegetable patch. And there, just about the level of the rutabagas, he sees the gleam of hidden gold. It's a nice story, right? 150 years ago, there was a boy born in what's today Latvia. He was born into a rabbinic family. Both his father and his grandfather on his mother's side were great scholars. He was sent off to the yeshiva of Volozhin, which was the Harvard of yeshivas. He became a student of Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, the famous Netziv, who I quote all the time because he said one of my very favorite lines in all of Jewish texts, Kol HaTorah Kula Shira, that all of Torah is written in poetry, not prose. This young man finished his yeshiva studies, and instead of becoming the Rav of a community somewhere in the neighborhood of Mendel the tailor, he accepts an invitation to go to Jaffa in 1905, to the port city from which Jonah fled and got interrupted by a whale. Jay Masserman is going to read that to us later on for his 31st time. 31 years in a row. I promised him 31 flavors. I haven't forgotten. Not today, though. This young man became the rabbi of Jaffa, eventually chief rabbi of Jerusalem, and in 1921 became the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of the British Mandate of Palestine. He died in 1935. This was Rav Abraham Isaac HaKohen Cook, Rav Cook. Rav Cook, great mystic and scholar, the one among the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox rabbis of his era, who sought to connect with the young Halutzim, with the young pioneers, the mostly secular socialists who had very little need for God because they were building the utopia with their own hands. Where most of his fellow rabbis saw these as heretics, Rav Kook saw them as great dreamers in the tradition of the Jewish people's great dreams. In his posthumously published collection of essays called Orot HaKodesh, The Lights of Holiness, he has this passage. I have loved this line for a very long time. Cholamot gedolot yesod haolam hem. Great dreams are the foundation of the world. Great dreams are the foundation of the world. Al shlosha devarim haolam omed, on three things the world stands. The Mishnah says, Al HaTorah v'al ha'avodah v'al gemilut chasadim, on Torah and on sacred service and on acts of kindness. To those three things, Rav Kook adds dreams. The world is supported by the dreamers. He goes on to say, dreams are manifested on different levels. The prophets dreamt, as it says, I spoke with him in a dream. Poets dream while they are awake. Isn't that a beautiful line? The mighty thinkers dream of perfecting the world. All of us dream of the time when God will restore the captives of Zion. He's speaking of the Messianic redemption, but I certainly couldn't read those lines without thinking of the faces over there on the wall. All of us dream of the time when I'll have the captives of our people restored back to us. He goes on and says, The crudeness of conventional life removes from the world the light of the dream, the splendor of its wide horizons. Only the uninhibited dream, which is in revolt against reality and its limitations, only that is the real truth of our existence. Only the uninhibited dream, which is a revolt against reality and its limitations, that is the real truth of our existence. Reality, or what people tell us is reality, the way things are, the way things have always been, the way things, chances are always going to be. That, Rav Kook says, is the great sin. Adjusting to the world as it is and ceasing to dream of the world as it could be. Rav Kook says dreamers are maladapted to reality, and by virtue of their maladaptation, they are able to see a truth that's obscured to those of us who have given in. Rav Kook was, for all of his inclusivity and great feeling of the oneness of the people of Israel, was an ultra-Orthodox rabbi. I found this text. Actually, I knew this text before. I had this up on my bulletin board in college, but I'd never seen the two of them together. This text popped to mind. It comes from Mordechai Anulevich. Mordechai Anulevich was one of the leaders of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, a member of Hashomer Hatzair, the youth movement where my parents met on kibbutz in 1973. Mordechai Anulevich was a leader in the fight against the Nazis and died in the famous bunker at Mila 18 in May of 1943, having held off the Nazi forces longer than the armies of some nations. This is part of the speech he was said to have given to his fellow fighters in some of their last days. The most difficult struggle of all is the one within ourselves. Let us not get accustomed or adjusted to these conditions. Let the one who adjusts ceases to discriminate between good and evil. He becomes a slave in body and soul. Whatever may happen to you, remember always, don't adjust. Revolt against the reality. An Orthodox rabbi, a young, secular, socialist, both of them articulating an ancient Jewish truth. We have been, from the beginning, a people who believed in our dreams. Because, you see, Mendel and the policeman both were dreamers. In fact, the policeman's dreams were the accurate ones. The policeman knew where the treasure was buried. What was the difference between Mendel the tailor and the actual prophet, the policeman on the bridge? Mendel could believe that great dreams could be the reality, could be the foundations of worlds. Failed, or rather, perhaps succeeded, in avoiding the trap of adjustment to conventional reality that says dreams are nonsense. Treasures are for someone else. The world just is a hard place, and then you leave it. The policeman laughed off his dreams. Mendel followed them. And that's where he finds the gold. That's been the story forever, right? That was the story of Abraham and Sarah, who late in life have a vision, a dream, hear an unseen voice that says, there is a different way to live. There is a different way to connect to God. There is the promise that you can go and be a blessing if only you're willing to take the chance. How many Abrahams and Sarahs probably got the call and laughed it off before one went? Maybe God had been calling since the beginning of time, trying to find somebody who could believe in the dream. And it took generation upon generation to find those people just crazy enough, just daring enough, just maladapted enough to pick up and go. Moses hears a voice from out of a burning bush telling him, a disgraced, exiled member of the palace, to go back and confront the most powerful king of the most powerful empire of the ancient world, and to make a claim that no one had yet articulated before in history, which is that there is a God who is on the side of justice rather than power. Nobody had ever thought there would be a God on the side of justice rather than power. In fact, the Pharaoh was God sitting on the throne, power embodied. Rabbi Lawrence Kushner says, that bush might have been burning all 400 years of the Jewish people's enslavement. It was waiting for somebody to stop and listen. It was waiting for somebody to believe they could. It was waiting for somebody with the chutzpah to say, here is a dream of liberation, and we're going to try to live it out. Dreamers upon dreamers upon dreamers in our history. Isaiah and Jeremiah, Amos and Micah, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Akiva, the Ari, the Baal Shem Tov, Theodore Herzl, Abraham Joshua Heschel, every one of our ancestors that got on a rickety wooden boat in steerage class and made their way across a sea in search of a new life. Every one of them, someone who believed in the power of an outrageous dream, an unlikely dream, an improbable dream. And they believed in it enough to go. There is a piece of nonsense, new age, mumbo-jumbo that I want to be very, very careful that I'm not articulating here. It is not true that if you can dream it, you can be it. It is not true that if you can picture it and picture it hard enough, it will come to you. Remember what Erin Heller told us at Rosh Hashanah when she introduced the story of Hannah, talking about her story, her journey with fertility? She said, be very, very careful not to be like Penina teasing Hannah. Be very, very careful not to tell a family trying desperately to have a child that if they just relax and want it a little bit more, it'll happen. There are plenty of people who want things with their whole selves and hearts who do not find them. Good, decent, wonderful people who don't find partnership in this lifetime. People who hold their loved one's hand, who pray with all of their heart and soul and might, and that person still slips away. Not everything is overcomable through the power of positive thinking. And those who say it is double victimize those who can't find the thing that they want the most by making them feel that if they just wanted it a little bit more, it would appear to them. It's not true that anything we believe that we can build, we can build. Anything we believe we can have, we can have. We cannot control the outcome of every situation or even many situations. But here's what's also true. While we can't guarantee by believing in something that we can make it happen, we can guarantee that if we don't believe something is possible, that it won't happen. You got that? We can't make it happen. But we can guarantee in our despair that it will never happen. Despair is a 100% accurate prophecy. Because when we believe that it can't get better, when we believe that it will always be this way, when we hear people talk about a better world and we dismiss them as naive, when we have given up on the possibility that our kids and grandkids can live in a more healed world than we have damned our kids and grandkids to live in the broken world we live in. Despair is 100% accurate because when we give up, we create that reality. There's a wonderful line I've been holding very close. This is from the social critic and essayist Bell Hooks. What we cannot imagine can never come into being. The world is defined by the limits of our imagination, not because we can make everything happen, but because we have to dream big. We have to imagine broad. We have to be willing to be hopeful, because the alternative is to give into the darkness. And we Jews, who have seen so much, who are the inheritors of such brave people and of such great dreams, we have come too far in this world to give the darkness that victory. We have to believe in the great dreams, even when they break our hearts, even when the dreaming hurts, because the comparison between the dream and the reality is so stark and so painful. But it's better than the alternative. It's better than adjusting. Rav Kook told us that. Mordechai Anulevich told us that. Revolt against reality. Don't let anybody say the way it is the way it always needs to be. We have some big decisions to make. As a country, as a Jewish people. It's not my job to stand up here and tell us what decisions to make. It is my job to remind us of the values that should guide our decisions. And the Jewish values that we need to carry, all of us, as American citizens, as people deeply invested in the future of Israel and the Jewish people, we need to remember that we are the children and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren of dreamers. That we are people who are meant to choose hope. However you define hope. That we are meant to choose a vision of what we believe will be the best possible world that we can pass midor lidor, from generation to generation. That we are meant to guide our future by our hope rather than our fear. Whatever that means to you. But what we can't do is we can't give up. We can't say that America is always going to feel this way. That it's always going to be that we feel this close to at war with ourselves. That the level of anger, of divisiveness, of hate, the way in which we tug at ourselves, that this is just going to be the status quo forever. We can't give in to that. It can't always be this way. It can't be that we take the lesson from this horrible year in Israel, that it's no longer worth it to work for peace. I listened to a few sermons given by a few colleagues in which they basically stood up in front of their communities and said, the lesson of this year is that we're no longer working for peace. We're focused on defending ourselves, and that's it. I understand the feeling, and I reject the conclusion. I reject the conclusion. My brother who made Aliyah to Israel, who's a tour guide in Israel, who has devoted his life, who lives under daily rocket fire in Haifa, who has dedicated his life to teaching people to love the land as he loves it. When I called him on October 8th and asked him what I should say to my community, he said, war does one good thing. It teaches people more deeply to value peace. That's the only good thing my brother, who chose to tie his lot and live on that land, wanted me to say. We can't give up. We can't give in. We can't let the hope go. And I'll close with this. In case that wasn't enough, coming from little Zach Greenwald, and certainly not enough coming from me. At the funeral of Hirsch Goldberg Poland, a 23-year-old who loved life and who had a big sign in his room that said, Yerushalayim is for everyone, who believed that. At his funeral, his parents, John and Rachel, who we came to know and we came to love, who have spoken some of the most powerful and prophetic words that any Jew has spoken in the modern era, at the funeral of their beloved 23-year-old boy, as they buried his bruised and battered and broken body, John Poland, Hirsch's father, stood up and quoted the most important line of the most important Jewish poem of the last 100 years. Od lo avda hatikva, he said. Od lo avda hatikva, our hope is not yet lost. That's at the heart of our people's anthem. We are a hoping people. We are a dreaming people. And we are people who take that hope and that dream and we turn it into reality as very, very best as we can. And when reality fights us, we fight right back. If John Poland can stand up, doing the worst thing that a human being can do, burying his son who was stolen, who was tortured, who was murdered in the darkness, if he can stand up in front of a crowd of tens of thousands, in front of the eyes of the whole Jewish world, and say, Od lo avda hatikva, hope is not yet lost because I will not give that victory to the murderer of my son and to other people's sons and daughters. If Mordechai Anilevich can say that in the Warsaw Ghetto, we better believe we can say it. The world belongs to the people who believe in the power of our dreams, not because we can always make them come true, but because despair is never a Jewish option. We have an obligation to revolt against reality, to dream the uninhibited dream, to build the world from our highest hopes. Shana Tova.